Hi friends, welcome back to Arc Tutorials. This is Angular 10 full tutorial series for absolute beginners. In today's episode, we will learn about HTTP post method. Whenever we are trying to create a new resource at the backend, so we use post method. Take some examples like login, create new user, create new lead, create new contact. Anything that you create or add new will most likely include a HTTP post. The difference between HTTP GET, which we saw in the last episode, is that the data is visible in the URL. Whereas whenever you submit a data using POST, that is hidden and is temporary in your browser. We will learn all about it and its implementation in today's episode. Welcome. This is part 75 of the Angular 10 complete tutorial playlist. I have planned more than 100 tutorials for you in this series, including a live project. Slowly you will see that we are stitching all the examples that we learned previously in this series. Slowly they'll be stitched together. So make sure that you go through all of the playlists so that you understand and learn entirely the functionality that I've taught in entire this playlist. I've covered from ground up, from scratch to most advanced use cases. So make sure that you check out everything so that you can learn and master Angular. Alright, so if you have any doubts in the following things that we have used so far, please do drop me a note and I'll be happy to help you. Today we are in 75th episode. Today we are learning about HTTP post. Let's get started. A quick note to our viewers who are joining us new in this particular episode. Earlier during the last two episodes we learned about HTTP client. What is HTTP client? It is used for performing HTTP request and responses. HTTP client service is available under the package angular/common/http. To work with HTTP client, we need to import HTTP client module, which is mostly or usually done in the app module. HTTP client allows us different functionality like headers, params, interceptors, etc. We will learn some of them in today's episode as well. So what are we going to learn at the end of this tutorial? At the end of this tutorial, you would be learning how to make a HTTP call. You will also learn how to make call of HTTP and pass headers. You will learn how to pass params. Sometimes you will be required to pass some parameters along with the post URL. We'll learn that as well. And finally, we will learn about how do you pass subscribe and catching the errors for processing. Let's get started. We have a lot of work to cover the ground. Alright, so these are some of the notes I made for you for your reference later, but I will start with the hands-on coding. Alright, so what we are going to do, if you are following along, you would see that when we learned Angular forms, we created a simple form using template driven form, and also I have shown you how to create reactive forms. Right. So I will be using one of the example, which is add customer, which we did using template driven form. So if you are not sure how to get this code, please refer to the tutorial. I have added that link in the description box below so that you get this component. To give an overview, I have created a component which is add-customer. In the form, it's nothing complex. Let me show you the output first. Here you have a simple form which has just three simple fields. I'm not styling it now so that it's easy for you to understand, but if you want, you can always style it using the bootstrap or any form input. Okay, so you can use it using any classes or styling of bootstrap or material design. That's irrespective of the design. I have three fields: input checkboxes, select drop down, and a text area. You can have any different types of input that you want to use. I'm using template driven forms, which means here we are using two-way data binding, which means we will be using banana model of ng model to bind the data so that we can get the form. That's why for each of the input or the input form element that you are seeing, you would see ng model here. and we are saying that this entire thing is a form using ng form, right? Like I said, I've covered this in detail in the template driven form. I'll not go there. Instead, I will focus on http post method here in this tutorial. So we have a simple form here, and we are going to capture the data and call the http method. In the component.ts, I have a submit button which is add customer, and if you see, nothing fancy, we are yet to do it, which is I'm just console logging the value we get from the form. Let's see this functionality before we start our post. I'll go to console, I'll clear it, and I'll stay here. I'll enter some details like YouTube tutorials, accept the terms, give some value, some more testing values, and click on add customer. When I do that, when I click on it, I get the form data captured. So now we will use some of this value to call the http post method. Now the first thing we have to do is inject the service that we want to use, and our service name is user service from slash dot slash services slash user service. All right, and then inject this into the constructor here and make it private. And I always suggest that make it small case so that you know that this is a service. Now we have injected the service, but let's go to the service definition, and we need to create a new method here in our service file, which is user.service. Again, if you're not sure what we are doing here, I recommend you that you see a couple of last two episodes. That's where I've shown you how to achieve that. So we are going to say add user as a method, and we will pass some body. All right, so what is this body going to have? This will have the data that we want to submit to the backend API. We already have the HTTP injected, so make sure that you check it out, because you have to learn it in continuation. You cannot skip it. So that's very important that you continue learning, otherwise you might miss out. So what I would suggest is, before you come to HTTP post, please refer to last two videos in this series where I've taught you about services. I've taught you about HTTP client, and I've shown you how to do HTTP GET. It's important that you learn in continuity. That's where you will be able to relate and work much better. So with that understanding that you have gone through these episodes, you would have the base. So we will use this .http, that is the HTTP client instance, and we will say .post. Now post requires us to pass two things mandatory. One is the URL, the other is the body, right? So in the last episode, I showed you that we are using a fake online APIs for our purpose. So if you go to the resources, let's say users. So this is the users. Now we are going to go to the docs and go to documentation, and you will be able to find the details of it, right? So what we are going to do here, if you go here and see post, right, so you can see all the guide here. So let's go to the post method. Okay, so it says if you want to create a new resource, put the URL. In our case, that URL will be users. Okay, and then we have to pass the body, which is the data that we want to update. So let's say this is the body. Take that, and I'm going to construct that here, and I'm going to say const post body is equal to, I'll create that JSON object here like this. Okay, now we will send some of the details here. So I'm going to say body.title, the one that we will send from here, and body dot I'm going to say description, and these are again whatever we want to pass, right? You don't need an ID. So once you do that, you would get the ID back. So save it, and I'm saying that I will send this as the body to the post method. Now let's work on setting up this in the component. So for that, we will have to go to add customer, and here we have injected the service. in the add customer method, I will say this dot user service dot add user, and it will tell me that it requires the body to be sent. So let's fix it here. We are getting the form value, so let's form that data here in the, instead of you doing it here, we can always do that right in the component level here. So here I'm going to say this dot form dot value, this dot form. So let's see the data first what we have, and we are going to pass it. So let's comment this for just a minute. Now come back here to our application and enter. Let's say this is title, this is title field, this is description, and select some package and add customer. So you can see that we are capturing first name and description as the field. So I'm going to copy that here, and I'm going to say here form value dot first name, and here I'm going to say description, form value dot description. Now the always it's a good idea to, before you send data, always make sure that you have that added. So here it should be value dot description. Always make sure that you check what data you're sending, that way your the bugs would be less, the number of defects that you will end up will be less. So here you have the body and not the post body, so let's replace it here for now, and it should be good. We are trying to capture the data. So I'm going to call this YouTube Angular series, and I'm going to be lazy, so I'm just going to copy paste it here, take this data, add customer, and we'll see that this is the data we are going to send. Beautiful. So now we got our data captured in add customer dot component. So what we are going to do now, comment, you can take this out. Now we are going to pass this to our post body here. So we are calling the method which is in the service. We are passing the real-time data that user will submit from the form and capturing that value using form value dot value. That's the name of the form we have given. Once we have done this, we are calling the add user method, passing this data. All right. Now, like, and what we'll need to do, since it is a service, right? So we can always, now let's call this here in the user service and return this, right? So we are doing a post and we are returning the response that we will get from the URL. Now in the add customer component, since we are getting the data as an observable, we will need to subscribe it. Go to data, and always good idea to capture the error logging, console.log, unable to add user, and once you get the data, console it and see what data you are getting. Alright, so that's all we have to do here. If you want to specifically mention what error, then you can always specify error also. Alright, this is good. Let's roll and see what happens here. So this is the title field. The data we are expecting back is the resource gets added and we will get an ID back. Let's add customer, and you see that we got an ID which is 11. See, our request did not have the, if you see here, we are doing post method to the URL and we are sending the data here. If you see, we are sending only body and title. If the request is successful, which is status is 201, that means it created. 201 means the resource is created, and we are getting back a response which is with ID, right? That means the post was successful and we are getting the data back and we are console logging it. To extend this, you can go here and similarly, just like how we did for get, we can pass some, let's say headers. You want to pass, you can say http headers, and you can say custom headers dot You can set or append, but I usually encourage people to put everything in one go. That way you are sorted on your, say, authentication key, some value, right? So you can pass this also, because just like get, you can pass options here and say headers, and passing the custom headers here as the headers, right? So now we can see that in our request, when we submit testing title and select here and select the value, click add customer, and now you can see that we are passing that as the request header here, right? So this way you're passing the custom headers to the post method, this one. Now similarly, you can pass the custom parameters as well. Sometimes you might want to send those. Again, it's not mandatory, but there are use cases where you might want to send them. So what you'll do, you'll write http params, and then you will say dot set, pass the param name, let's say um, user role, and you can pass anything here. These will be the URL params that you can see it in the URL, and you will pass them also again as part of the options, and you can say params, and you can pass your custom params to the post method. Again, this setup requires you to check what API is accepting, but this is what you would do mostly. Title is here, description is here, and data, and accept, and click add customer, and you can see that now you are sending params also along with the post. In the post, whatever you submit will be secured, but the URL you will make it visible. Okay, so this is 201, that means it's successful. In the preview you can see we are getting the ID back. Now, so what we learned here is we have learned how to use post method using the form which is in our add customer. We are capturing the real-time data and sending it to our method via service, which is a post call. We are subscribing to that data. Upon successful, it'll show this. There are different ways to show the mechanism. Like for example, you can say here div and say ng if is created, is user created. If user is true, then show message and say class bg success, background success, and then you will say user added successfully, and you will have this boolean value defined in the add component, add customer component, and say this is of type boolean. By default it is false, and you will say if data is true, then you would just say this dot equal to true. Okay, so we got the data. If it is true, we will see the message now. So title, or we can give some meaningful name. We say learning app is the title, and say premium, some description, and say add customer, and now you see the message comes user added successfully, right? So that's how you know that the user data was sent. We got the ID back, we see the params are sending correctly, it is status is 201, and we get the request payload. We can see what data was sent, which is the dynamic data we just created. And last thing check you will do is whether headers are being sent. So that is all you would do to post the data using this service http get method. So again, you can typecast it. By default it is observable object. If you want of a certain type, you can say that I'm expecting user of a certain type, and use this also to data typecast it, right? So what did we learn today? We learned about the post method. We learned how to pass data via form and dynamic data. Second, simple post call, post method. We learned post with headers, post with params. We learned to subscribe the data, catch the error, And last, learned how to typecast the data for interfaces. Right? So if you do these well, you will all be sorted. At least you will be better position to start integrating any or all of your applications post method requirement, which is whenever you are creating resources using the backend API. I hope it's clear to you. Do let me know if you have any doubts. If you like my work, please do consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/arctutorials. Also, I welcome you. Please do post any if you have any questions, queries, or doubts. I'm here to help you. Thank you so much for joining. See you in the next episode. I will walk you through how to implement a put call. Put call is used whenever you want to update the data or an existing resource via backend API. Join me in the next episode. We will learn about HTTP put method. Thank you so much for joining. See you in the next episode.